People think companies collapse overnight. They do not. They rot quietly until one decision finally snaps the whole structure. For mine, it was the morning the chief executive officer's son refused to promote me and handed my job to his girlfriend. Hi, I see your comments. And yes, Portland is home. My name is Maris Calder, 38 years old, mechanical systems engineer. I have spent nearly 2 decades keeping industrial lines alive in this city, but I am not the kind of person anyone notices. That is probably why they thought they could get away with what they did. The meeting happened on a Wednesday morning. Brandon Hale, the chief executive officer's son, leaned back in his chair like he was conducting the most important negotiation of his life. His tie was crooked, his hair too perfect. Across from him sat Lisa Caro, his girlfriend of barely 6 months. I had seen her around the building marketing assistant, always filming short videos in the hallway, always talking about fresh culture. Maris, Brandon began, tapping the edge of my promotion file. We really appreciate your dedication. You mean 20 years? I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He nodded too quickly. Right. 20. But we are taking Echelon Dynamics in a new direction. Younger. More visible. More brand forward. I looked at him. Brand forward, I repeated. For a mechanical systems manager, Lisa gave a sharp laugh, like she had been waiting for her cue. That position is mine, she said, leaning in as if she wanted me to smell her perfume. You have had your run. It is time for someone who can keep up. I felt the floor shift not because I believed her, but because this was the first time in my career someone had spoken to me as if I were an inconvenience instead of the person who held their entire operations together. Brandon slid the file back to me, eyes already drifting toward Lisa. That is our decision, he said. I stood, understood. I did not argue. I did not defend my work. That morning, walking out of that room, I felt something slide into place, a certainty sharper than anger, steadier than fear. They thought they were closing a door on me. They had no idea what they had just opened. When I first joined Echelon Dynamics, I was 20 years old and too stubborn to understand how politics worked. Back then, the company still occupied an old warehouse near the river, a place that smelled like rust and ambition. I walked in with a toolbox, a degree no one cared about, and the belief that if I worked hard enough, everything else would fall into place. Calder, can you take a look at this? My first supervisor, Grant, used to call out. He was loud, impatient, always kicking equipment to see if it would wake up. I learned quickly that I was the one who would stay until midnight when his shortcuts caught up with him. By the time I was 25, I was the person everyone called when a design failed at the worst possible moment. Maris, the client is furious. Can you fix this before they pull the contract? I heard that line more times than I can count, and I always fixed it. Even when it meant staying through the night, even when leadership pretended the next morning that the crisis had never happened. People left constantly. Good engineers. Smart ones. They packed their desks and muttered the same thing, I cannot work under another political hire. It became a pattern. If someone got too competent, too steady, too respected, someone above them would restructure the department to make room for a friend, a cousin, someone who fit the culture. One afternoon, years ago, an engineer named Tessa slammed her notebook shut and said, "You realize they are never going to reward you, right? They like you because you never complain." I told her, "Someone has to hold the place together." She shook her head on her way out. Yeah, and they are counting on that. I stayed anyway. I stayed through reorganizations, bad leadership, ego-driven decisions, and promises that evaporated faster than they were spoken. I stayed because I believed skill would eventually matter more than names, connections, or whose hand was on whose shoulder in a boardroom. And walking out today, all those years suddenly felt like a long, quiet warning I had chosen not to hear. The announcement came on a Monday morning. A managerial position was opening in systems operations. No explanation, no transition plan, just an email from Brandon Hale with the subject line, "Exciting change." Around the office, people exchanged looks. No one said my name aloud, but I heard it anyway, carried in the way they turned toward me, then away, as if acknowledging something so obvious felt risky. "You're applying, right, Jonah?" one of the younger engineers whispered as he passed my station. "I am," I said. "You should have been manager 3 years ago," he muttered before moving on. I prepared everything: project archives, safety records, retention data, the report showing that one of my redesigns had saved the company more than $200,000 in potential recall losses. I printed them neatly and walked into the conference room at exactly 9 o'clock. Brandon sat at the head of the table, flipping through my file like it was a restaurant menu. "Maris," he said, smiling too wide. "This is impressive. Really. But we're doing a full rebrand, fresh image, fresh leadership." I kept my voice steady. "Leadership requires experience." He shrugged. "Experience is good, but energy is better?" Before I could respond, the door opened. Lisa Caro stepped in, wearing heels too loud for the carpet. She gave Brandon a little smile, then looked at me like she was examining a stain. "Are we doing this now?" she asked. Brandon gestured to the chair beside him. "Yes, Lisa is shifting into a more public-facing leadership role. We think she's a strong fit for the manager position." Lisa leaned forward. "That position is mine," she said. "No hesitation, no shame. It suits someone who understands visibility." I felt the air change in the room. Brandon didn't even look at me. He closed my file and slid it across the table. "Thank you for your interest, Maris." I stood slowly, refusing to let my hands shake. In the hallway, 2 younger engineers pretended not to stare. Later that afternoon, both of them sent me messages. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say." None of us did. I read the messages twice, closed my laptop, and finally understood something I had ignored for far too long. I drove home without turning on the radio, just the sound of the tires humming over the bridges and the low thrum of semis passing along the industrial corridor. I had taken this route for nearly 20 years, morning after morning, night after night, always telling myself loyalty meant something, that if I stayed steady, the work would speak for me. But Brandon's voice kept replaying in my head: fresh image, young energy, and Lisa's grin, sharp and satisfied. "That position is mine." I tightened my grip on the wheel. I remembered another moment, years ago, when I had been offered a temporary lead role during a production crisis. The team was falling apart, and Tessa had begged me to take it. I stepped aside back then because I thought supporting them mattered more than claiming a title. I convinced myself it was the mature thing to do. That decision followed me for years. Now I felt the weight of it sitting hard in my chest. When I walked into my apartment, I did not sit down. I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. I typed my resignation in one paragraph clear, professional, and without apology. Reading it over, I felt my heartbeat settle into something calm. The next morning, I went straight to Brandon's office. He glanced up when I entered, already half smiling. "Look, Maris, I know yesterday was disappointing, but let's not be dramatic." "I am not being dramatic," I said, placing the envelope on his desk. "This is my resignation." His smile dropped. "You're serious, I am." Lisa appeared behind him in the doorway, arms crossed, smirk already in place. "You're really quitting over this. I am leaving because I am done making excuses for other people's decisions." I said. I headed toward HR to return my badge. The woman behind the desk took it carefully, then leaned in just enough for only me to hear. "If I had your courage," she whispered, "I would leave too." I walked out of the building feeling lighter than I had in years. I had barely shut my apartment door on my first day as a free woman when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out, but habit won. "Maris." This is Alan from Concord Industrial. Are you still with Echelon? I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. No, I left this week. There was a long exhale on the other end. We only signed because of your oversight. Brandon told us you were transitioning to a background role. Is that true? It is not, I said. I resigned. Silence. Then, I knew something was off. That was the beginning. By the end of the next day, I had 4 missed calls and 2 voicemails. Hi, Maris. This is Dana from the Westward Project. Can we talk, Maris? This is Ed. Heard a rumor you're gone. Please call back. I sat at my small kitchen table, listening to message after message, each one layered with confusion, irritation, or something dangerously close to panic. I told every caller the same thing. I am independent now. Calder Systems Consulting. Nothing more, nothing less. I made 0 offers. I pitched nothing. I simply confirmed the truth they had not been given. On the 3rd day, Alan called again, this time with his voice low and tense. We have a serious problem. What kind of problem a design modification went through without testing? The weld placement is completely off. If we run this batch, we are risking structural failure. I shut my eyes. Who approved it? He hesitated only a second. Lisa. Of course it was. I cannot touch anything tied to Echelon. I said, but I can tell you what to look for. Check the stress points along the lower frame. Compare them to last year's spec sheet. You will see the mismatch immediately. He muttered something sharp under his breath. You kept this place steady, Maris. We thought they understood that. I did not answer. Not because I doubted him, but because, for the first time, the truth was shifting out loud and not from my mouth. The first sign came from Jonah, the junior engineer who had messaged me after the promotion meeting. He called late in the afternoon, his voice low and strained. Maris, the retrofit on the Kingsley project failed inspection. Badly. I steadied the phone. What do you mean, failed? They flagged 3 major safety concerns, all tied to design changes Lisa pushed through. He paused. She told the inspector the old systems were holding us back. She meant yours. I let out a breath, slow and controlled. I documented every version I built. They know that. Brandon doesn't care, Jonah said. He told the team it's legacy processes causing the setback. Legacy processes, my work, my standards, all the systems that kept their contracts alive for nearly 20 years. The next morning, Alan called again. Another issue. A shipment got recalled. Wrong bracket specs. They said your old documentation confused the new team. Of course they did. Later that day, I received a message from Talia, one of the newer engineers. Lisa melted down on a call with North Shore Manufacturing. She couldn't explain a single metric. Brandon stepped in and blamed outdated workflows. I rubbed my forehead, and the client believed that no, Talia whispered. They asked for you by name. Before I could respond, a second message from her appeared, this one with an attachment. Look at this. She wrote. Inside the file was a test log. The timestamp had been overwritten. Twice. She falsified this, I asked quietly. Yes. And she made us sign off on it. I closed the laptop and sat still for a long moment. I could have sent that file to a dozen people and watched Echelon burn in a single afternoon. But I would not play their game. Truth would surface without my help. Instead, I saved the file, backed it up, and added it to the documentation I kept for myself, nothing more, nothing less. The first contract fell on a Thursday morning. Alan called again, this time with no attempt at politeness. We are pulling out, he said. Concord Industrial is terminating immediately. We cited performance degradation on Echelon's side. They know why? I heard papers shuffling, voices in the background, tension rising. Alan, I said quietly, I cannot intervene. I am not asking you to. He replied, I am telling you what your absence exposed. By noon, another message arrived, this time from Dana at Westward. They missed a compliance window, she said flatly. We are done. And yes, we're filing a complaint. Safety first. That same afternoon, Jonah texted me. Safety board is scheduling an audit. Everyone's panicking. I typed back, be honest, keep receipts. He responded instantly. Half the engineers are quitting. I might be next. Later that evening, Talia called, her voice shaking. A federal review flagged 4 major issues. Maris. All tied directly to Lisa's approvals. Brandon is telling everyone you left us in a mess. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. You and I both know the truth. He is drowning, and he wants someone to blame, she said. He keeps saying the systems are failing because you took your processes with you. My phone buzzed before I could answer her. A call from Brandon, then another, then a third. I let them all ring out. An hour later, a voicemail landed in my inbox. His voice was sharp, frantic, losing its polished edge. Maris, call me back, immediately. You need to help fix the chaos you caused when you walked out. We have an inspection coming, and none of these kids know your workflows. Pick up the phone. I set the phone face down on the table. He still did not understand I had never been the chaos. I had only kept theirs contained. The audit results leaked before the board could contain them. By midweek, every trade newsletter in Portland was circulating the same headline: Echelon Dynamics faces compliance failures after leadership shift. My phone lit up nonstop, not from Echelon, but from former colleagues sending clipped messages. It is bad. They are exposed. Everyone saw Lisa freeze during the review. By Friday morning, a board representative finally contacted me. Her name was Adrienne Pike, a quiet woman with a voice that carried a weight Brandon never had. Ms. Calder, she said, we need clarification on several systems. Would you be willing to meet? I will not return to Echelon. I replied, I am not asking you to. She said, we just need the truth. We met in a conference room at a neutral office downtown. Adrienne placed a stack of papers between us. These are systems credited to your department. We cannot find internal documentation for half of them. I nodded. Because leadership never approved them for formal integration, I submitted every update. They sat in email threads, unread. She blinked. You are telling me these systems have been running without official oversight? Yes. And they have passed inspections for almost 10 years because I maintained them. Adrienne exhaled slowly, pressing her fingers to her temple. This is worse than the audit suggests. She flipped another page. Lisa is suspended. Brandon has been removed from operational authority pending full review. I see. Echelon is falling apart. Ms. Calder, she said, we need a clear record of what existed, what you built, and what can be proven. I opened my folder and slid forward every document dated, signed, cross-checked, no speeches, no accusations, just the truth they had ignored for too long. Adrienne looked down at the pile, then up at me, her face tight with understanding. Adrienne called me the following Monday. Her tone was steady, measured, the opposite of Brandon's frantic messages. The board has reviewed your documentation, she said. We would like to offer you a consulting role during Echelon's restructuring, high authority, full autonomy, compensation in the upper executive range. I let the silence stretch. Ms. Calder. She prompted. I appreciate the offer. I said, but I am not returning. You would not answer to Brandon. Or Lisa. I know. I drew a breath. That is not the problem. She understood before I said anything else. You think the pattern will continue? I know it will, I replied. The structure has not changed. Only the faces. Adrienne hesitated, then said quietly, for what it is worth. I wish you had been in leadership 20 years ago. Me too, I said, but we do not get to rewrite that part. When the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table and opened a notebook I had carried since my early 20s. Half the pages were filled with sketches and modifications. The rest were blank. I flipped to a clean sheet and wrote the name of something I had been imagining in the back of my mind for years. Calder Mechanical Initiative. By the end of the week, I had a plan, drafted training, mentorship, certification prep for women in mechanical fields across Portland, especially the women over 35 who kept getting told they were not the right fit for leadership. I emailed a few former colleagues for feedback. Within an hour, Jonah replied, "If you're starting something, I want in." Talia sent a message right after. "Please tell me you're building a real alternative. I'll follow you anywhere." Even Ed, who had left the industry briefly, wrote, "If you need an extra pair of hands, I'm yours." I looked at the growing list of names, people who had stayed silent too long, people who wanted something better and felt something settle inside me. I had walked away from Echelon, but I had not walked away from the work or the people who believed in what it could be. I read the announcement on a quiet Thursday morning. It came through in a plain email forwarded by 3 different former colleagues, each one adding a single line like they could not believe it themselves. Echelon Dynamics Leadership Restructure. Effective immediately. Brandon Hale removed permanently. Lisa Caro banned from all technical and compliance-related roles after falsified documentation was confirmed. External oversight appointed to run the company until it could stand on its own again. I set my phone down and let the silence settle. I didn't destroy their company, I said out loud, just to hear the truth of it. I simply stepped away, and the truth did the rest. Later that afternoon, I walked past Echelon for the first time since I returned my badge. The glass doors were propped open, contractors carrying out boxes of outdated equipment. 2 board members stood outside arguing quietly about timelines and damage control. No one noticed me. That felt right. I paused on the sidewalk long enough to look at the building, nothing more. No bitterness climbed up my throat. No satisfaction either. Just a clean, steady calm. I had spent nearly 20 years holding the place together, and it had taken less than 6 months without me for everything to fall apart. Not because I wanted it, because they had built their entire foundation on borrowed stability and never bothered to learn what kept it standing. I continued walking. An hour later, I was back at the small shared workspace I had rented for Calder Mechanical Initiative. Jonah was rewriting training modules. Talia was arguing with Ed about torque specifications for an upcoming workshop. They looked up when I entered. "You saw the news?" Jonah asked. "I did. And how do you feel?" Talia added. I set my bag down and nodded toward the plans spread across the table. "I feel like we have work to do." They smiled, relieved, energized, ready. They took the title. I kept the talent. And in the end, talent is the only thing that survives.